I never envisioned myself having a marriage that was involved bringing somebody over from another country. And also, I was never wild about getting into a long distance relationship. So it happens, but I will talk a little bit more about the visa process and getting married when you're a same sex couple. The process in the United States is relatively new compared to everywhere else. And I wasn't even aware that in 2013, they had already made the policy to process same sex marriage green cards. The one thing you had to do is you still had to get a valid marriage someplace. So, as far as our experience being a same sex couple, we really luckily didn't have any other issues. It wasn't treated any differently. And one of the concerns that we had going in, not really just having like a homophobic officer reviewing our case, but um, I thought besides the age gap, which actually was never mentioned either, I was afraid that the country he was coming from was homophobic, and some people have a bigger fear of this. Will it be scrutinized more, and are they going to ask, well, what do your parents think? And actually, my husband, we did process the entire green card without his family knowing, which, of course, he was definitely an adult by then, but the whole kind of doing it secretly was kind of strange. Actually, once I began working on doing the visa, I initially looked at doing it with a lawyer, which in a lot of ways is smarter. It's also a lot more expensive. And so I talked to a couple, and the first thing I'd hoped was that using a lawyer would make it go faster, which it really doesn't, except for, hopefully, if you can screw up your case, then it'll take longer. But for a lot of us, especially if you're same sex, I think you have an advantage in that you're more likely not to be dealing with children, previous marriages, which, of course, that happens all the time anyway, but you're less likely. So actually, one of the officers that did our interviews said that he preferred same-sex marriage cases because they were more straightforward, and we same-sex couples also tended to document better, because I think straight couples tend to go in thinking if they've got a marriage certificate and maybe a baby that they're ready to go, whereas gay people don't take anything for granted. If you're thinking about marrying someone abroad, you have to document that you're in a bona fide relationship because of marriage fraud. And it's also, some countries are scrutinized more than others, especially like what they call MENA, Middle Eastern, North African countries like Morocco, Monaco, things like that. So you're going to get married. You're going to have to prove you have a bona fide relationship. So what you're going to do is you have to start documenting. And they want pictures. The number of pictures isn't as important as maybe the quality. I would say 10 pictures is good. But they want to see them in different settings with different people, like in social settings, and ideally with each other's family or one or the others. 100 pictures of just your wedding day is, to them, is one picture. It's one event. The good news is you can pretty much do everything electronically. So the person who's getting the visa in the immigrating country, you don't really have to worry about like a piece of mail showing up at your house. We did, just in case, get a P.O. box for Luis when he was down there, just in case something had to turn up, and it didn't. Actually, he never checked it. So who knows, maybe this many years later, there's still a piece of mail sitting there. But you can actually do it. They're not going to come to your house and talk to your family. They're not going to talk to your neighbors. The other thing I would just say to consider is you have the opportunity to get a fiance visa or a spousal visa. I would say the cruelest visa that they have out there is the fiance visa. And the reason why, and I would only use it as a last resort ever, is because it's a one-time use visa only. So once you come in, the only way you can ever travel outside the United States and come back in again is to get married and or adjust status. You have to get married and adjust status once you do that. So during that time, you cannot work, you cannot study. Most people have a hard time just even getting a bank account. You can't get a social security number. So and it can take 6 months or longer. So you really have to ask yourself, so if you're the United States person bringing the person over, are you equipped to have somebody, just hang out for 6 months? They can't even go to school in most cases unless you want to pay like the full out of state tuition. And I think even that, I'm not sure, like you can still just pay out of pocket and go. I think you still have to prove some kind of legal status. And I think the K-1 by itself doesn't show that. So financially, it's a financial burden. Can you have somebody living with you, and they have to start up from scratch? So that's more expensive than even somebody coming with their own stuff. And then for the person that's coming in too, you have to realize, even though they might be happy to be here and they might be glad you're together, really fast, they miss their friends and family back home. And if they have nothing meaningful to do, it gets boring. And the K-1 can really kill a relationship fast. And the last reason I'm against them is if during this 6 months or maybe even a little longer, if there's a medical emergency back home, then that person has the cruel decision of abandoning their visa and starting over again, or just, not returning home for, it might be a sick family member or a funeral or something like that. So that's just something to consider. We met in 2014. We got married in 2016, and he didn't come to the United States until the end of 2017. So we had several years, and we, like every year, had seen each other at least 3 weeks out of the year, if not more, spending like time together. So, and plus I worked with him on his school stuff. So I knew everything he told me about his life was the real deal. So I would say, is it worth it? It's definitely, you definitely appreciate your spouse more, because once you've been through all of that, you worry a lot because you submit the paperwork and you wait and you wait, and it takes a long time. So once you've been through that, and of course you second guess yourself. Did I fill out the form right? Did I mess something up? What if this happens? What if I get a cranky officer? You definitely appreciate your spouse a lot more than somebody who just happened to meet somebody and you move in right away. So from that aspect, I would say it's good. But I think at the same time, you really, really have to be careful that you're dealing with who the person says they are. Because I'm surprised, people will meet somebody maybe for a week or less and then start getting married and assuming everything else that they've known over the internet is true. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, if you've met the right person, definitely start following the process. Just have a lot of patience, budget for it. It's not cheap. Take it one step at a time. And the scary thing too, when we first got married, this was just the same year that Trump would be elected. So we were pretty nervous, about the politics for the next year or two, because everything first happened under Obama, and then of course Trump was fiddling around with immigration policy, and every time I turn on the news and he was talking about it, I did worry. We'll just put it that way. I worried about that. I think more and more it's pretty solid, so you don't have to worry about something taking it away. But if you're filing, definitely get it done sooner rather than later if you can. But again, first taking your precautions to get to know the person and know that everything's genuine, and that's the main thing. But I'm glad I did. And just, I guess, as an epilogue, he did get his initial conditional visa. He did get his permanent visa. And then just last August, he got his citizenship. So he's just been plugging along. So he's now a citizen, and he's getting his master's in accounting.